You probably don't think about them much, but global ports? They're the invisible engines of our daily lives, the critical junctions that connect us to, well, everything. But this lifeline of our entire economy is facing an unprecedented threat. Okay, let's dive right in and unpack this.
So to really get a handle on what's at stake here, we've got to look at the numbers. And a massive study from the University of Oxford, well, it paints a pretty alarming picture of just how big this problem is.
Get this, 86%. That is the percentage of the world's major ports that are exposed to more than 3 different kinds of damaging climate and geophysical hazards. Just think about that for a second. We're not talking about just one threat. It's this dangerous cocktail of risks, storms, flooding, rising sea levels, all converging on these absolutely vital coastal hubs.
$7.6 billion. That's what experts estimate is the annual cost of physical damages to our ports. And remember, that's only from tropical cyclones and river flooding. This isn't some abstract problem for the future. This is a bill that's coming due right now every single year. And if the cost of repairs wasn't bad enough, look at this. $67 billion. That's how much trade is put at risk every year simply because of port downtime. When a port has to shut down, even for just a day, the financial shockwaves are just massive. They ripple out and disrupt supply chains that stretch all the way across the globe.
Okay, so we've seen these big, almost unbelievable numbers. But what does a threat to some port thousands of miles away really mean for you, for your wallet, and for the stuff you rely on every single day?
Well, here's the crucial point. Over 90% of all global trade is carried by sea. That makes our ports the absolute choke points of the entire globalized economy. They aren't just part of the system. In many ways, they are the gateway to the system.
Seriously, think about it. That disruption we mentioned, it's not just some number on a spreadsheet. It means a delay in the parts needed to build your car. It means a sudden price spike for your morning coffee. It's that empty shelf in the store where your favorite product is supposed to be. We are all, every one of us, connected to the health of our ports. And look, this isn't just a forecast or some what-if scenario. We have seen exactly what happens when these systems break. When Hurricane Katrina hit the U.S., it didn't just flood a city, it shut down key ports and basically crippled a massive artery for the country's farm exports. And the Tohoku tsunami in Japan, it showed us how one single event could inflict billions of dollars in damage on completely irreplaceable maritime infrastructure. So, to figure out how to protect these crucial places, experts first need a common language, a way to measure and really understand the risk. And it turns out it's not as simple as just knowing where the next storm is going to hit.
The key question they're asking isn't just, is a port at risk? It's, how vulnerable is it? And that right there is a much more complex and, frankly, a much more important question to answer.
So researchers define vulnerability as a system's susceptibility to harm. But here's the really important part. It's not just about being exposed to a hazard. A port could be right in the direct path of a hurricane, but not be all that vulnerable if it's well prepared. It's really all about how ready or unready a system is to handle that impact.
This idea of vulnerability actually breaks down into 3 core pieces. First, you've got exposure. Is the port physically in the path of hazards? Simple enough, right? Second is sensitivity. If a storm does hit, how much damage will it actually do? You can imagine old, crumbling infrastructure versus a brand new reinforced terminal. And third, and this one is absolutely crucial, is adaptive capacity. Does the port have the money, the plans, and the governance to prepare, respond, and recover? A wealthy, well-run port just has a much higher capacity to adapt than one that doesn't have those resources. Now, I know this all sounds pretty grim, but here is the good news. All around the world, port cities are not just sitting around waiting for disaster to strike. They are actively creating a playbook for survival and for resilience.
So, the billion-dollar question, or I guess in this case, the trillion-dollar question, is what does that playbook actually look like? What are the concrete steps these cities can take to fight back?
Well, a huge part of the answer is coming from groups like C40 cities. This is basically a network of the world's biggest cities, all collaborating, sharing what works, and driving real action. And they aren't just talking about it, they are creating and rolling out real-world solutions. And here are some of the chapter headings from that C40 playbook. As you can see, it's a really holistic approach. We've moved way beyond just building higher seawalls. We're talking about smart things, like integrating land and water systems, managing rainwater to turn it from a threat into a resource, and even finding creative ways to finance these huge long-term projects. This is about systemic redesign. To see just how powerful this can be, let's zoom in on just one of these strategies. Let's look at a real-world case study
that really proves the value of investing in these things ahead of time. And this, right here, just brilliantly illustrates the economic argument. So after a single massive storm cost them nearly $1 billion in damages, the city of Copenhagen had a major realization. Their entire comprehensive plan to protect the city from future storms cost just over half of what that one single storm did. The lesson is crystal clear. It is so much cheaper to prepare than it is to clean up the mess afterward.
Okay, so we have a playbook. Individual cities are taking action. That's great. But the problem is that ports don't exist in a vacuum. They're all part of this vast, interconnected global network. You see, protecting one port is fantastic for that one city, but it doesn't solve the risk to the whole system. Think about it. If the port of Los Angeles is secure, but the port of Shanghai is underwater, the supply chain is still broken. The real challenge now is figuring out how to scale these solutions system-wide.
And we can't just have every port for itself, right? Imagine a frantic, uncoordinated global rush to build protective infrastructure everywhere at once. It could actually trigger its own crisis, straining global supplies of materials like concrete and sand, and stretching financial resources past their breaking point. We have to be strategic about this.
Which leaves us with the ultimate, really complex question. It's not just if we can protect our ports, but how we do it. How do we build a global strategy that prioritizes the most vulnerable and most important links in the supply chain? How do we coordinate investment and share resources so we aren't all competing for the same materials? You know, the stability of our entire economy really depends on finding the answers,